Welcome to Sunday Springboard with Melanie and Carolyn Coaching, where we help women recover from and thrive and flourish after stress and trauma. Do you wonder what in the world happened? You were this confident, happy, joyful person. You were living a good life. You had a good job. You had friends. You went and you did things and you had fun. And then you met this person and they were amazing and they showered you with love and they made you feel so good and so warm and gave you positive compliments. You thought they were your soulmate, and now it has just turned out terrible. And still you can't leave. You find yourself listing all the terrible things going on in your relationship. You know the situation is toxic. You know that you should leave, but some reason you don't. You just stay. You feel powerless. Sure, you have some valid concerns about where you're going to live, how you're going to support yourself. Maybe you're worried about being prevented from seeing your loved ones, but it seems more than that. You are probably experiencing what is known as a trauma bond. This emotional attachment develops out of a repeated cycle of abuse, devaluation, and positive reinforcement. You're not crazy, you're not silly, you're not stupid. You've had an experience that even can take even the strongest person down. Even strong people can be trained to submit by the right combination of praise and punishment. Today, we're going to discover what exactly is a trauma bond, how to know if you're experiencing one, and what to do to move out of it. A major factor in trauma bond is what is known as intermittent reinforcement. So they did studies a long time ago in the labs. They did this with lab rats, and they were trying to find out how can we make this where rats will push the button to get food even after there's no food being provided. Okay, so they started off, they showed the rats where the food was. Every time the rats pushed the button, they got a pellet of food. Push the button, get a pellet of food. They do this for a while, the rats get used to it, they're doing it, and then they quit giving them any food when they push the button. It doesn't take very many times. They push the button a few times, they don't get any food, they just quit doing it. So that didn't work at all. Next, they try, okay, let's see what happens if we give them food after every 10th time. So they start off giving it to them all the time, and then they start giving it to them every 10th time. So the rats started learning they had to push it 10 times and then they would get one. So they would come and 10 times, get it, 10 times, get it. Then when they quit giving them the food, took them a few times to realize what was happening, but then after they did that a few times and there was no food, they quit. No more pushing the button. They tried it again, doing it every 10 minutes. The same kind of thing happened. The rat just learned what to do and how to get the food. And then when the food quit coming, they just quit. But the last thing they did, they were able to fool the rat or get around on them. What they did was they made there be no pattern at all. It was intermittent. So for a little while at first, they get it every time they push the button, and then they get it here, they don't get it there. They get it now, they don't get it here. Very random, very intermittent. They did that for a while, and then they quit giving them any food at all, and the rats kept pushing the button. In fact, they actually pushed it more than at the very beginning when they were getting it every time. So what does this mean for us? Those rats kept pushing the bar even though they were never rewarded again. They continued to work in the hope that someday they would once again be rewarded. So how is this with a relationship with an abusive person or a narcissist person? There are 7 stages we're going to talk about. The first stage is called love bombing. Now, this kind of it goes along with the very first time when they're showing the rats where the food is and the rats are getting it every time. So you meet this person, they shower you with love, they just overwhelm you. They have fallen in love with you at first sight. They're constantly complimenting you and buying you presents and texting you emojis. And I mean, it's just wonderful. They just make you feel so loved. And they're giving you your treat every time. You start to trust that this person is going to love you forever. This is your soulmate. You're so happy that you've met this person and now you're depending on them for love and validation. Then we move into stage 2, which is performance rewards. So once they feel a little secure with you, they stop continuously rewarding you. So now they start rewarding you only when you do something that makes them happy. When you do something that actually they want, you're giving them positive attention. Now, at first, they were giving it to you regardless. It was unconditional and it was constant. Now it's only when you do something positive for them. However, this is still okay because you love them. You want to do things for them. And so you're normally doing this. And so they're giving you this positive reinforcement. And you don't realize at this point that you're only getting it when you're doing something specifically for them. You're still getting enough of the good stuff that you're not actually realizing. So this is like you're getting rewarded when you press the bar, but you don't really realize that you're not getting rewarded unless, um, like I said, unless you're pleasing them. Then stage 3 starts. So this is criticism begins. So your devaluation starts, your rewards decrease. Now in this stage, they've really gotten you. They start to occasionally mistreat you. They start getting critical of you. They become controlling. They might publicly put you down. You still get occasional emotional treats, but now they're unpredictable. The bad moments start to outweigh the good. You're now on the equivalent of that intermittent reinforcement schedule. Again, you're not really understanding what happened. So this guy or the woman, it doesn't matter what gender you are, but at first they were this wonderful, loving all the time. Then it slowed down a little bit. It still was good, and now it's more critical than not, and more abusive than not. This is moving into the stage 4 of gaslighting. If this is your first experience with an abusive person or a narcissist, you're likely to be extremely puzzled. Why is this happening? I don't understand this. How can they be this way? How can they say they love me and treat me this way? What happened? Well, they will supply you with the answer. The answer is that you are the problem. You have caused this because of your behavior. If you would not do A, B, or C, or if you would start doing X, Y, or Z, then everything would go back to being perfect. You are overreacting. You are imagining things. This is all your fault. This term gaslighting refers to a movie in which a man was trying to make his wife go crazy by making her doubt her own perception of reality. And this is what happens. When you're in this stage, you start doubting your own perception. Well, I know he said that. I know he did that. But he's like saying, I did not. I did not say that. I did not do that. You're making this up. You're imagining things. As you start to feel a little bit crazy, actually, I've heard women say, I feel like I'm going crazy because of what is going on here. Especially because at first you believe them. You believe them, and so you start trying to act better. If I act better, they will love me. They will go back to being the person that they were at first. You're not realizing that the person that they were at first was a fantasy. You feel like something has happened. The way they were at first was who they really were, who they really are. And what has happened now is because you're not being the person they want you to be. And so you're making yourself crazy trying to do what they want you to do so that they will love you and go back to the way they were. And you end up in what is called a mini Stockholm syndrome. You may have heard this terminology also. This generally is used when you're talking about kidnappers. So they would kidnap someone, and if they kept them for a long time, instead of the person that has been kidnapped really hating and being angry at the people that grabbed them, because they're taking care of them, a bond develops, and so they start having a feeling of affection toward these people who kidnapped them. This is the same way. Instead of you being angry at this person for their abusing you, you have affection for them, and they are in charge of everything. They are doling out your treats, your rewards, your love, your acceptance. You're depending totally on them now. You allowed yourself to become dependent. So now stage 6 comes up, and this is resignation and loss of self. So now you're this hopeless prisoner, helpless prisoner. It's not hopeless. We will talk about that in a minute. But you're helpless because you're hoping if you do exactly what they say, you show them how much you love them, then they will go back to loving you and being kind to you again. Stage 7 is addiction, leaving, and hoovering. So at this point, you are addicted. You're addicted to their approval. You're not thinking rationally. You're, instead of hating them for abusing you and wanting to be rid of them, you're afraid you're going to lose them, or especially going to lose them to someone else. You're totally trauma bonded to them at this point. This means you're refusing to see the obvious, which is that this person never loved you. They cannot love anyone, and they are too narcissistic to care about what they've done to you. The harm they've done to you, the damage they've done to you, they just don't care. So let's say you get strong enough and you summon up this inner strength to leave. They all of a sudden will change, and they will start being kind to you again. They might send you a text saying, "Hey, how you doing?" They may like your social media. They may if you've already left, then they might actually stalk you. They may come see you, call you. They're trying to suck you back into this relationship, and we call this hoovering, after the vacuum cleaner by that name, because they're trying to suck you back in. So as they're doing these various things, if you don't respond like they want, they may start love bombing you again. All just, oh, they love you so much. Here are some of the things they say. "I love you so much. Life is not worth living without you. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I treated you that way. I see now that it was all my fault. I learned my lesson. From now on, I will treat you like the king or queen that you are. I will prove my love for you every day. Just come back, or just don't leave. Everything will be different this time. I have changed. I will go to therapy. Let's go to counseling." All of these things that they're going to tell you. And this may put you back into wishful thinking. You may get sucked back into the relationship at that point because you're like, "Oh my word, they've never said these kind of things before. They've never taken responsibility. They've never admitted it was their fault. What if they've really changed? Won't I regret it forever if I don't give them another chance at this point?" At this point, you're choosing to ignore everything that you know about this person on the slim chance that they have somehow magically transformed into a decent and reliable human being who actually cares about you. What's really going on here is that it feels really good to be wanted again. Everything that they're telling you, no matter how unlikely, is exactly what you want to hear. It's like a soothing salve to your wounds that they created. You were so humiliated and hurt by this careless way that they just discarded you. And you have already invested so much in the relationship, so much time, so much of your heart, maybe so much of your money. You may have actually lost your friends and your family because they have isolated you. You've put everything into this relationship. And if there is any chance that it can be saved, you want to give them that chance. It feels so good to be courted again. And you don't want to walk away. You don't want to feel like you just wasted all this time. And I do want to tell you this, even though at this point, and even later, you may feel like, "Oh, I wasted so many months or years with them." You did not waste those years. You learned, you grew. And if you want to work with me or with anyone, you can think back through all the things you learned, and it will make you a stronger, happier person. You can actually help other people too. That's down the road, because I know right now you're still thinking that you didn't want to waste any more time. So if you let yourself get hoovered back in, you let yourself get back in the relationship, the cycle of abuse starts again. The moment they feel like you're back, they've got you again, it starts all over. The rewards start diminishing again. You get that intermittent reinforcement again, and you're right back where you were. Only you might be worse because now you're upset at yourself that you gave in and went back or didn't leave after all. Here's a few more other signs that might let you know that you're in a trauma bond. So maybe you feel unhappy. Maybe you don't even like your partner anymore, but you still feel unable to end things. When you do try to leave, you feel physically and emotionally distressed. When you say you want to leave, they promise to change, but nothing ever happens. You fixate on the good days. You keep reminding yourself of those good things and just, why can't we go back to that? You just ruminate on that. You keep hoping that they are going to go back to that because you use that as proof to yourself that they really care. Well, they couldn't have done this or said this if they didn't love me, could they? I just have to change now, and then they'll go back to that. So you might make excuses. You defend their behavior when others express concern. You continue to trust them. You continue to hope to change them. Here's a test that might help you, though it's not at all conclusive, but ask yourself whether you would encourage a friend of yours who was in the same situation as you, whether you would encourage them to leave that situation. Try to answer this honestly and then think, okay, if you answered yes, that you would encourage them to leave, but you cannot leave yours, that's a good indicator of trauma bonding. So let's talk a little bit more about why this happens. So I know you've probably talked to some people, and people out there that are having experience that don't understand why it's so hard to leave. They're like, you're being abused. Just leave. Just get out of this situation. They believe that you're perfectly capable of leaving. Actually, you are perfectly capable of leaving. However, your strength has gotten hidden. It's gotten hidden away as you've been developing this trauma bond, but it is still there, and we can find it and we can move forward. But at this point, with it still hidden, that trauma bond makes leaving so difficult it's nearly impossible. But the thing is, we don't choose this. We didn't choose abuse. We didn't choose to experience a trauma bond. We didn't choose it, and a lot of it actually comes from biological. Now, if y'all have listened to any of my previous videos on trauma, and in fact, if you missed those, go to my website, kimberlincoaching.com. Look on the Springboard tab, and there's videos. There's 4 of them on trauma, and some of what I'm going to say here in a minute, you will have already heard on those videos. So whether you've seen those videos or not, you've probably heard of fight, flight, freeze, and we're actually going to add another one today, fawn. Now, remember that our brains are always looking for danger. They always want to keep us safe. When our brain senses danger, it floods us with over 30 hormones. We call that the fiery cocktail. And when you face abuse, or when you face the possibility of future abuse, or when you have this fear of leaving, impending distress, your brain sends that warning, floods you with all those chemicals, and now you can't think clearly. You're agitated, you're distressed, and because you can't think clearly, this helps them get in more control. You don't feel like you can safely escape. I read people say, my brain feels foggy. I forget things, and you start not trusting yourself. And so you're afraid to make these major decisions because you're not trusting yourself. But actually, it's this physiological thing. You've got all of these hormones. Another thing that happens when you're in this situation is it's so difficult to think of the abuse. You just start focusing on the positive things and you ignore the rest. You make excuses for them, you justify their behavior so you can rationalize your need to stay. So each time this happens, you feel more and more powerless. Every time you think about leaving, you get the flood of hormones. They hoover you back in. You get more and more powerless and hopeless. You feel like you can never escape. You come to realize that the false reality, you come to believe this false reality that they have constructed. They're going to tell you, you need me. Nobody will love you like I love you. They'll tell you, I need you. They may threaten to commit suicide if you leave. They will do different things. They will either be manipulative and try to guilt you, or they might be intimidating if you leave. Most covert narcissists aren't going to threaten to kill you, but we do know that there are definitely abusive men who threaten to kill and actually do kill. So if you're having any physical violence at all, that escalates all this up really quickly, and you need to do something to get yourself safe. So when we're in this situation, we're flooded with all these hormones, and then they do something that's nice and kind. And there's a whole nother set of hormones that we call the feel good hormones, like dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins. And when they're nice to you again and they give you a hug or you cuddle, or they say sweet things to you, or anything that makes you feel like they're loved, that you're loved again, you get a rush of these feel good hormones, and it feels so good, and you want these again. And you're in this cycle of the fiery cocktail, and then you get the happy ones, and this just makes it harder to break the bond. This is that intermittent reinforcement um, theory, and it's a physiological thing. It's not just an emotional or mental thing, it's physiological. If you have experienced trauma or abuse in your childhood, you're going to be more likely to experience this in adulthood because you're used to it. You've experienced the cycles of the up and down, and it feels normal. It doesn't feel as out of whack as it really is. It makes it harder to break the trauma bonds, but you can. You can learn to stop them. None of this is as hopeless as it seems. We can work through these things. So, what are some tips to help you start moving out of this trauma bond? First of all, just know what you're dealing with. Realize that you are having this trauma bond. Realize that it exists, and don't be in denial about it. That you can't move out of it if you are denying that it exists. Of course, we know that this is often easier said than done, and you may need some help with this. One of the things you can do to help yourself find evidence of the abuse and to recognize the signs of this trauma bonding is to start keeping a journal. Write every day what happens, write what they do, maybe write what happened before, what they did, and write whether they said something to excuse it later. When you start getting this built up and you have all these pages of this happening over and over, it will start to be a little more it'll make a little more sense to you when you see them making these excuses all the time and saying it didn't happen, and you wrote it down right there when it happened. So start doing that, and um, start keeping that journal. Another thing is to consider your relationship from another perspective. Like, what if you're reading about this in a book? Would it be okay? What if your best friend or your daughter came and told you this story, this situation? Would you think that this was okay and that this was not abuse? Pay attention to the details. Pay attention to the small details that make you feel uncomfortable and give you pause. What tends to happen is we start just ignoring those flags. Maybe the first ones are just pink flags, and we just ignore them. And then when they get to be mighty red flags, we're still ignoring them because we're still getting the rush of the good chemicals when we're getting the rewards off and on. But pay attention and see, do these feel healthy to you? Talk to your loved ones. Now, this one is hard, and it may not be possible or even wise for you to talk to people that are really close to you because they are so close to you. They just want you to be happy. They get mad at the person, and they're not thinking clearly either because they just want you to get out. That's probably what they're going to tell you. And then you're going to feel defensive. But if you can talk to them, or if you have friends you can talk to, saying the words out loud and listening to them and seeing other people's observations can help you get out of denial. I used to make excuses in my head all the time, and it sounded realistic and rational. But then when I would say the words out loud to someone else, I would realize how unrealistic it was, how it truly was excuses that I was making. So um, if you don't think it's wise to talk to your close family members, if you can find someone who can be objective, either a friend or a support group, a coach like me, which we'll talk later, or a counselor or a therapist, but someone that you can talk to and actually say the words coming out of your mouth. Another thing that's so important is to avoid self blame. Stop believing that you caused this abuse. Stop believing that you brought it on yourself. If you're critical about yourself in this matter, it's going to make it harder to make any moves. So here's an interesting thing. Think back to our our hormones getting pushed, the fiery cocktail. And I've talked about this in the other videos. If when we first get that rush and we get those feelings, if we're critical to ourselves at that point, that makes our brain just keep on pouring out the hormones. And so you're just keep in this agitated, activated state. So start talking to yourself in a different way. Give yourself some self-compassion. You got in this situation because this person was nice to you. There were valid reasons to start listening to this person and believing them. And you were a kind person. You want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. You wanted to believe in them. These are not bad things. They took advantage of these things, but these are not bad things. And you are not silly or stupid, or you might have been a bit naive, but you're not unwise because you're learning now. So just remind yourself that no matter what you may have done, that this abuse is not your fault and it's not okay. That no matter how much you fear loneliness or a life without this person, it's still not your fault. And no matter how many times you've gone back, just stop beating yourself up about this. You can't leave until it's the right time. Believe me, I know. When it's the right time, you'll be able to do it, even if it's hard. But you can't do it when other people think you should, and you can't do it till you're ready. You can get help determining what is the truth. And once you realize what the truth is and start increasing your strength, then you can do it when it's the right time. So when you do decide that it is time to leave, you need to disrupt the cycle completely by cutting off all communication. Now, if you co-parent, this might not be possible, but you can get help to establish a plan where you have just minimal and only necessary contact. There actually are some phone apps and some different things that can help you do the co-parenting with as little interaction as possible. So you need to create physical distance by finding a safe place to stay, such as with a relative or a friend. Consider changing your email, your phone number if you can. If you can't do that, block them completely. They might get through with the new number, but then you can ignore these messages and calls. And listen, I'm going to tell you something. You do not have to answer the phone call, and you do not have to answer the text. You may have this sense, and I remember I had this sense of I had to answer immediately. I had been groomed to feel like I had to. And when I started having the thought of, huh, I do not have to answer that. I do not have to answer that text. It was empowering and freeing, but it was weird at first. So tell yourself this, you do not have to answer. So if they, if you've left and they're trying to call you and text you, they may be doing that hoovering thing. They're going to insist they're going to change. They'll go to therapy. They'll do anything to make you come back. Just let me prove to you that I've changed. Let me prove to you how much I love you. And these promises can seem pretty tempting, but you got to remind yourself just how many times they've promised this and nothing happened. Now, if you've been keeping that journal, that will help you here. You can have this list of things, and every time that you get weak and you think about going back, then you read your list and then you remember and you remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. You may need to get professional help. As I said, that if you need some help later, I'm going to tell you how you can get that from me. And if it's depending upon the severity of your issues, you could need a therapist or a counselor, or you may be able to get all the help you need through a coach like me. So, some more tips. Make a commitment to live in reality. Now, if you find yourself wanting to fantasize what could be, what you hope for, what you wanted, stop. Remind yourself that you have made a commitment to live in the truth. Even if you don't choose to leave the relationship right now, just tell yourself, I'm going to live in the truth. I'm going to believe what is true, even if I'm not leaving right now. So stop fantasizing about what is not happening or what is happening. Live in real time. This means stop holding on to what could happen, what will happen tomorrow, the fear of it or the hope of it, either way. Notice what is happening right now. Notice how trapped you feel right now. Notice how unloved you feel right now. Think about how you have compromised your self-respect your self-worth for this relationship, pay attention to your emotions. Stop hoping and waiting. Start noticing in real time, right now, what is happening and how it is affecting you. Live one decision at a time and one day at a time. Sometimes people scare themselves by saying, I have to never ever speak another word to this person. This is kind of like saying, in order to lose weight, I can never eat a piece of chocolate cake. That's probably not going to happen. And you're going to freak yourself out and think that this is too hard for you if you make those big, wide, generalizing statements. For today, for this hour, I can do no contact. I cannot communicate with this person. Number four, make decisions that only support your self care. Don't make any decisions that hurt you. This goes for emotional relapses as well. If you find yourself feeling weak, again, don't berate yourself. Don't get on your case. Don't criticize yourself. Talk to yourself with compassion and understanding and reflection. Be curious. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I behaving this way? But do it with compassion and self love. I know this feels weird. You might have loved yourself before, or you may have never loved yourself. And I know that the situation you've been through has beat down the concept of that. But start working on that. Start trying to treat yourself like you would treat your best friend or your daughter. Don't beat yourself up in every encounter that you have with the object of your obsession. Stop and think about each choice you make. Make choices that are only in your best interest. Don't worry about hurting their feelings or being disloyal to them or them getting mad at you. None of that matters. What matters is taking care of yourself and your children if you have children. Number five, start feeling your emotions. Now, when you're away from this toxic person, you start to feel tempted to reach out to them for reassurance. Stop. Consider writing about your emotions instead. So here's an example. You could say, I feel sad, lonely, fearful. I miss I miss the person, I miss companionship, I miss security, I miss love. I wish I could be with so and so right now. But I'm going to sit and I'm going to write down my feelings instead. I'm going to teach myself how to feel my way through the obsession rather than turning to the person. Now, this could be used in any kind of recovery. If you're not wanting to turn to something that's self damaging, alcohol or food or drinking or drugs or shopping, whatever. The idea of feeling your emotions is a vital part of any recovery program. Y'all, any of you that know me very well know that I've said this a lot of times. It's like trying to avoid your emotions, like trying to hold a beach ball under the water. It keeps popping up at inappropriate times. Whereas if you just let your emotions come out, feel them, process them in whatever way you need to. You can write about them, you could share them with another person. There's all kind of ways to feel your emotions, to process them and let them go. If you try to avoid them, they're going to stick around and you're going to do things to avoid them that are going to hurt you. And that may be part of the reason that you end up going back to them, is because you just can't stand the negative feelings that you have when you're leaving them. Learn to grieve. Now, letting go of this toxic relationship and breaking this traumatic bond is one of the hardest things you're probably going to ever do in your life. And what you had or what you thought you had was a beautiful, wonderful thing for a while. And it is truly a loss. If you could have had that all your life, that would have been a wonderful thing. So allow yourself to grieve the loss. I realized that I was grieving a dream. The dream of a marriage that will last a lifetime, the dream of a family that was never broken, that was always whole. All of these ideas that I had that were dreams and illusions for me that I could not have. And I had to finally allow myself to grieve the dream, grieve the illusion and move on. Number seven, understand the hook. So understand what exactly it is you're losing. So they may have told you No one will ever love you like I do. No one will ever need you like I do. So the feeling of being needed, the feeling of being wanted, the feeling of being loved, whatever this is that they were going to provide for you, identify what that is, and that is the hook. Now, this might be a fantasy, a dream, or an illusion. Once you realize what the hook is, then you can start going ahead and grieving it and moving on, and realize that that person is not going to fulfill that deep unmet need of yours, and get over the idea that you have to get that need met through them. You are not going to get it met through them, but you very possibly can get it met through many other ways in your life. So when you grieve, one of the ideas of grieving is just we're just opening up our hands and we're just letting it go. Just letting it go and letting the feelings wash over us, and know that this is temporary and we can move on. Number 8, write a list of bottom line behaviors for yourself. Some possible examples would be: I will not date someone who calls me names. I will not argue with someone who has been drinking. I will take care of my own finances. I will not have conversations with anyone when I am feeling desperate or defensive or obsessive. Whatever your areas of concern, determine what you need to do to change and make those your bottom line behaviors. Number 9, build your life little by little. Start dreaming about your future for yourself and for your children if you have children. In other words, make dreams that don't involve your traumatic partner. Maybe you want to go to school, you want to start a hobby, go to church, or join a club. Maybe you want to do some volunteer work. Start making life affirming choices that take you away from the toxic interaction that have been destroying your peace of mind. Lastly, build healthy connections. The only way to really free yourself from the unhealthy connections is to start investing in the healthy ones. Develop other close, connected, and bonded relationships that are not centered on drama. Find people who love you no matter what. You don't have to act a certain way. You don't have to behave a certain way. They're not judgmental, and they will support you in what you're doing. Make these your go-to people. It's extremely hard to heal without support. Maybe impossible, I don't know, but it's definitely hard. So notice the people in your life who show you loving concern, care, and hang out with them as often as you can. You may have pushed some of those people off in your life because they wanted you to leave this person and you felt defensive. Now might be a time to start re-establishing those friendships with them in whatever way. You also can find their support groups of people that can support you. Also, as I want to offer to you, if you are feeling like you're experiencing a trauma bond and you would like some help moving out of it, I can help you. There is a link in the show notes. If you use that link, you can schedule a free coaching session with me. No sales talk, I promise that. And we can talk, we can work out some things, we can see um, whether we fit for each other, and I can help you make some decisions that can help you start moving down the line out of your trauma bond and into the freedom and the love and the joy and the life that you want to live and the life that you deserve to live. Meanwhile, I hope that I have given you some tips and today has been useful for you. Have a great week.